The opinions expressed by the Reverend are his own and are considered thought crime in all jurisdictions. Consider yourself warned. Sooner or later, they are going to take me down. But in the meantime, you guys keep showing up, and I can't thank you enough. Get ready to choke with that collective truth, cock boys and girls. It is time once again for the Sunday sermon. Welcome. Everybody get that energy together, man. Come on in on the drum roll with me. Here we go. We got Joey on board, man. Easter Sunday. Everybody celebrated Good Friday a couple of days ago. See how many people are just taking Easter off, man. Joey, it may just be me and you today. Who fucking knows, man? But I'm okay with that. As long as we got the salt and the sarcasm on board, and I've got a little bit of a sounding board that isn't an echo chamber, I think I'll probably be all right. So, Aaron on board. Okay, cool. They're starting to file in. I knew I could count on Aaron being here on a Sunday. He's not the most religious fella. So, then again, he might have been out doing some pagan rituals. Who knows? We're going to touch on all of that as well. Chris Reyes. Happy to have you on board, good sir. Dennis on board. Emmy, right on. All of my usual suspects. Happy to have you here early. We got a lot of stuff to get to, some of which makes for an easy segue and some of which does not. Boston Chip Bone, brother, bang. Always good to see you, man. Always good to see you on board. Bone, man, longtime supporter and a good friend. Hell of a fighter, too. Don't know if he's still throwing them dogs these days, but I can remember him back in the day. I have a very strong religion, just not like most people. There you go, Aaron. Okay, that works too. We'll float it. No need to justify or define, man. We just kind of roll with it, man. Welcome to your Sunday afternoon, people. Getting started right on time. Usual bumper music for all you guys who aren't familiar with it or who need to be reacquainted. A little band called Red Desert out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, a city that finds itself in the news once again under the least auspicious of circumstances, and I'm sure they'd rather be living without it. They'd much rather living without it. But unfortunately, history has thrust itself upon them and is fucking them with a heavy-duty truth cock. Guess we're going to see how that turns out. It's going to be one of the things that we get into here. But I just wanted to start it off, throw the bumper music on. Anybody who is going to make it out, just give them a chance to get here. I'm sure we're going to have some late arrivals as usual. Coming at you from the undisclosed location down here in San Marcos, Texas. Go ahead and fade the music out and we'll get this thing rolling for you guys. I have a special guest in the studio today. We're not going to bring her on board, but she's decided to join me for the thing. Normally, she's either out working or, just observing this thing from somewhere else. But my wife, Charlie, those of you who have met her before, she's been fantastic. My number one fan and my top supporter right here. We'll let her drop into frame and then just, I like that little cameo appearance. Just kind of pop in and then slide right out again. I'm not going to interfere with your rant time, dear. Okay, cool. That's seems to work out. Okay, so let's jump into this thing. First of all, want to commemorate the occasion, want to commemorate the day, and I'm going to do this for the sake of all of my folks out there, particularly my friends of faith. I've never made any bones about the full width and breadth of my spiritual path. I was raised in the church and steeped in the scriptures, and I can lay down a fire and brimstone sermon for you in 30 seconds or less, man, and just leave your spirit lifted. But that is not my path now. I am an honest true heathen. Follow the path of the old gods. The one thing that I will always have in my heart for my Christian brethren out there is the strength of their faith and what it did for me throughout my life in times of trouble before I discovered my current path. And the way that the strength of the faith of my Christian friends inspires me to this day. I can promise you, a lot of people will make a lot of noise about all dogmatic religions being equally violent and all dogmatic religions being equally reprehensible. I have to say that for the record, I disagree. And when we are lining up dogmatic religions, Abrahamic religions in particular, and what they have brought to Western civilization, if we're going to line up all of those religions from that region of origin and what they have done for the strength of the civilization of the West that I hold close to my heart and revere, I stand with the Christians above and beyond any of the others. And should their tribulation, should their time of crisis come, all of my friends of faith can expect to find me standing there with them in the struggle. So for the sake of those friends of faith, for the sake of those friends who observe the Christian religion, I want to wish every one of you guys a happy Easter. I also would like to say to my friends who may not be necessarily of faith, that the strength that you can find in the metaphor of Christ, the strength that you can find in the metaphor of supreme sacrifice and redemption, is something that you should certainly not ignore. There's a lot of strength to be taken from that belief. There's a lot of strength to be taken from that metaphor. So for you guys who are just out there, now, of course, we all take our playful jabs and our meaningless little jabs, but for you guys that really think you're being edgelords just by taking the easy jab at the Christian religion, maybe I'm not the guy for you, and maybe this isn't the broadcast for you, because I'm not like you. I'll take the easy jokes. We all have them, you know what I mean? But the guys that are possessed of genuine malice for the Christian religion and will take a jab at Christians simply because they know there's probably no consequence. You're not going to take a jab at Judaism because it'll end you career-wise. You're not going to take a jab at Muslims because they have a tendency to blow things the fuck up when they get offended. You're going to take that easy jab at Christians because they're going to pray for you. There's nothing edgy about that. It's fucking weak, and you're a fucking coward. There, I said it, and I won't take it back. So yeah, just a little perspective on that whole thing. Things bug me a lot all the time, but every now and then I have occasion to comment on those things. And today just seemed like the appropriate day to comment on those things in particular, it being Easter and all of my friends of faith celebrating the resurrection of the risen Christ. So happy Easter to all of my friends of faith, and to all of my pagan friends. Happy, seasonal holiday of your choice. I'm not going to speak in particular to your faith. You may follow a Celtic path or a Nordic or whatever, but we can all celebrate together. And I'm going to cheers to you with a little sip of liquid enthusiasm. Happy Easter, everyone. And then we'll just go ahead and jump on into the meat of this thing. What do you say? Speaking of the Christian religion, I did promise I was going to get into this a little bit today. And again, having gone through the full disclosure, you guys know that I am not of that faith, but there's a lot of wisdom to be taken from those scriptures. And here's one from the very last book in the Bible, Revelation, chapter 13. He causes all, both great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And I would go further, even though this particular post does not. Here is wisdom. Let he that hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. And that number is 613. threescore and 6. That was just from my own. That was just from my own memory bank. That last little bit. Yes, Ryan, we're going to get into John Titor and the time travel thing. Oh my goodness, just going to bring it down. You just couldn't let me escape it, could you? Ryan is my brother, and I love him very dearly. He is king of the obscure conspiracy reference, and he always manages at least once a week to drop something on me. He had to go through, and I swear, man, Mo dropped that on me. Mo's holding it down for me on social media right now. My buddy Mo Baxter, Moses Baxter, since we're making all the biblical references. Mo's holding it down for me, and he sent this over, and he said, your boy Ryan sent me some shit, and I fired back. I was pissed. I fired back. I was like immediately, like all caps. And I was like, will you tell him that I'd like to get through 1 week without that? Yeah, we're going to touch on it, man. We're going to touch on it on the way out. Remind me, please. I'm on a tear right now. Son of a bitch. Anyway, so Mark of the Beast. I reckon Martin Luther was more important than Paul. Yeah, Ryan, you're probably good on that. Another thing that I will say for Ryan is he's a lot more of a scholar than you would probably give him credit for. So when I start throwing out these biblical references and obscure historical references, he's definitely surfing on top of that wave. Back to the Mark of the Beast thing, before I get too terribly sidetracked. I am consistently amazed at the number of people who will make cultural references to the Mark of the Beast that aren't actually familiar. This gets back to what I was talking about earlier, people that talk scripture that haven't been raised in it. People who will make references to the Mark of the Beast as a cultural reference who aren't familiar with the scriptures that inspired it or what the nature of that prophecy is about. A number of horror movies, a number of television shows, people who talk out their ass because their mouth should know better, and they will constantly make reference to that Mark of the Beast thing. And they may not, in the course of that, be entirely familiar with the nature of that prophecy and what it means culturally. So I wanted to catch everybody up to speed on that and tie that in to some of the things that are going on right now. Just as I lamented last week that you don't have to be a Q believer to understand why satanic references in a children's video would be indicative that there are satanic pedophiles in Hollywood. You don't have to believe that to understand why other people would. And I would say much the same rule exists with regard to the Mark of the Beast. Again, let's, going back over and reading it, causes all, both great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on the right hand. Therefore, okay, cool. So this is the Antichrist marking his territory. Not really. The key thing to focus on here is that if you don't possess the mark, you won't be able to buy or sell. That's the essence of the control mechanism. You not being able to engage in commerce without possessing that mark is more of a control factor than any outright prison camp or ankle bracelet or electronic tracking chip, or even, you don't need to keep track of all the people or have them imprisoned. You just make it impossible for them to engage in commerce. And suddenly they can't eat and they can't feed their families and they can't purchase necessities. They're basically dead in the water if they refuse to accept the mark. And it's easier to implement than mass incarcerations or mass digital tracking or because you only have to implement such a tyrannical measure at point of sale, not with each individual. You have, say, for instance, 330 million people in the United States. You have 100,000 Walmarts. Which is easier to control? Is it easier to put a chip in 300 million or an ankle bracelet on 300 million? Or is it easier to set up 100,000 point of sale systems at retail establishments where you are not allowed to engage in commerce unless you have on your right hand or your forehead that mark of the beast? This is the nature of the reference. They're controlling your commerce. Now, I wonder if we could think of anything in contemporary news cycle that would, I don't know, restrict your ability to purchase or do business unless you had a particular mark. Somebody want to help me out? Because I'm thinking, it just seems like these radical, crazy Christians are just making stuff up out of whole cloth, referring to a mark of the beast, an electronic system that would make it impossible for somebody to buy or sell unless they had a particular something, like a passport of some kind, a digital passport of some kind tied to one particular means of social control. I'm reaching for it. I can't. I don't know. Somebody want to help me out? Dennis, you want to jump in on this and maybe let me know? Yeah. So again, not asserting that the vaccine passport is the mark of the beast, in the same way that I'm not asserting that Little Nas X is really part of a network of satanic pedophiles. But you have to understand the strength of these people's belief system. You have to understand the reverence to which they hold their holy scriptures and the sacredness to which they accord that scripture in particular about the end times. And you need to take into account the sheer numbers of people who you are dealing with that consider themselves Christians, at least on the periphery, if not outright evangelicals, that take that whole fire and brimstone mark of the beast thing very, very seriously. And when your method of social control, even assuming for a second that I don't believe that there is any social control directly tied to this thing that they're trying to do, and the measures that will no doubt follow, okay? For all of you slippery slope fallacy people, slippery slope is not a logical fallacy when there is historical precedent. In the same way that the TSA was just supposed to be a temporary move, only for the duration of the emergency after a terrorist incident that happened 2 decades ago. That the Patriot Act was only supposed to be for the duration of the emergency after an incident that happened 2 decades ago. And it's only going to go this far. It's certainly not going to develop mission creep and go outside the constraints of its original dictate. Nope, certainly not going to happen. That's where we're at. I wanted to get into this because, again, it being Easter and touching on the Bible, touching on the King James Version of the Bible. That's what I was brought up with. I don't know what Christians are reading now. I think a lot of old school guys are still reading the King James Version. I'm reminded of that Bill Hicks bit, about every time people revise the Bible, it's like, I think what God meant to say. I've never been that confident. There is nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. You're absolutely right on that, Joey. I'm going to share that with everyone as we're flowing through. I don't want, and I'm not going to spend the entirety of this sermon getting preachy on that whole mark of the beast thing. But I did want to address it for a couple of reasons, to make people aware of it, if they weren't already, because some people don't pay very close attention to the news. Some of you don't have time. And some of you, I have found out through personal messages, count on me to boil the news down for you. If I'm the voice of reason, you should probably do some serious soul searching. But I'm honored that you've placed me, on that level of social strata. I'm really honored to hold that position of honesty and integrity in your life. But yeah, it's a little scary. I wanted to address this because it is Easter, and we were paying proper homage to all of my friends of faith out there that are definitely looking at this stuff, that are re-examining wanted to post Ryan's comment up there, that are re-examining things in a modern light. And I know that all through the modern era, there have been plenty of times where the Christian faith and different offshoots of the Christian faith have looked at it and said, these are the end times. And they've been wrong. They have looked at it and said, this will be the mark of the beast. And they've been wrong. Hal Lindsey, for those of you that remember that fire and brimstone stuff from the 70s, was that the beast with the 10 horns were the 10 nations of the European Union until there were 11 and then 12 and then 13 and 14 members of the European Union. There are plenty of times that that the Christian religion or various sects thereof have made such dire predictions and have proven to be made in error. And as a result, those sects or offshoots of the Christian religion are no longer taken seriously. Which begs another question, and then probably we can move on. If one single doomsday prediction, more to the point, why is it that for these people in question and these particular religious offshoots in question, they make one doomsday prediction that doesn't come true, and suddenly they are no longer taken seriously? They set one date for the rapture, and Jesus doesn't come to gather his congregation in the sky. They set one thing as the mark of the beast that turns out not to be the mark of the beast. They set one prophesied organization as the beast with the 10 horns, and it turns out not to be the beast with the 10 horns. They get it wrong once, and suddenly they are ridiculed and no longer taken seriously. Why, I often wonder, do we not apply the same standard to the climate weirdos? Just in my limited time on this planet, I can remember going through my childhood in the 70s, and I'm not slagging on this, because this is what inspired a lot of my early interest in preparedness and survivalism and things like that. I spent a lot of my early childhood in the 1970s being told that there was a fresh ice age coming. During the late 70s and the 80s, I was told that the overpopulation of the planet was going to lead to environmental catastrophe. During the 80s, I was told that nuclear plants were going to melt down and that acid rain was going to destroy all the crops, and there would be mass starvation. And then we got on the global warming tip, and then once the global warming tip couldn't be verified, that turned into climate change. And it's this steady arc of 50 years of misguided doomsday predictions. And me sitting here being the guy that wants the freaking doomsday hits 52 years of age and is still waiting around for Armageddon. Part of it is that I don't like the lack of logic of the whole damn thing. That's part of the reason I'm pissed off. But if I'm honest, I'd say that a good chunk of the reason is that I'm pissed off is you guys promised me doomsday and it's not here yet. Get on it. Anyway, a little more liquid enthusiasm, because caffeine is clearly and visibly just what I fucking need right now. We forgot it. Yeah. You know what, Joey? I'm just going to let you list all of them while I move on with this rant. Yeah, the hole in the ozone and the, oh my God, don't even get me started. This is not, again, circling back, since hashtag circle back, since that's all the rage in the media nowadays. Circling back to the Christian faith, it's entirely possible, probable even, that this vaccine passport is not the actual mark of the beast, right? I'm not gonna be that guy to say this is it and the end times are at hand and this is the fulfillment of the prophecy. It's entirely possible, probable even, that it is not. I bring all this up simply for the sake of pointing out that you cannot throw stuff out like that and expect that an organization, a group of people, no matter how small, how large, that are that based in their faith are not going to make these observations. And you can't be upset with them when you do. What is popular culture's way of dealing with these people who take it like that? They don't try to convince them otherwise. They result immediately to ridicule and deplatforming. You come out with an electronic device or an electronic something that is going to cause you to take a mark in your hand or in your forehead. And speaking of, are any of my Christian friends out there starting to get a little tweaked about that? When you go in, it's like, oh yeah, we need that mark in your forehead, and they raise the temperature. They raise that thermometer up and they put it up where? They put it up to your forehead. That was actually what set me off about a week ago when I started thinking about it. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to need to put this scanner up to your forehead to see if you can come in here to do business. Those little alarm bells started going off. It's entirely possible that people are wrong that are according that level of importance to that particular piece of technology, the vaccine passport or the microchip or any damn thing. But you're not going to dispel the apprehension that they have by trying to ridicule them and shut them up. You're not going to dispel the depth of their belief and their apprehension by telling them that they're fools that must be silenced. It's not the way to go about it, Sparky. Let's look no further than the way that the federal government handled the Waco debacle back in '93. You have a group of people who believe in their heart of hearts that the authority of the government is going to rain down fire and brimstone upon them, and there will be a final conflict between their group and Mammon or Babylon. Well, what would be a way to talk them down from that? Oh, I say we hit their church in the middle of the hill country with 2 cattle trailers full of guys armed with automatic weapons. That ought to settle them down. Guys, we need to start thinking about this stuff. We need to start processing it through the lens of people who have a different belief system, and to learn something about the width and depth of their belief system to where we can have a more engaged dialogue with people. Find the common ground. If you're out there and you don't happen to be Christian, and you're out there and think that those people are pretty ridiculous or whatever, and you're always taking the easy joke and slagging on them, and there are no good religions and other things like that, you're doing yourself a disservice. Because as I've said from the start of this Sunday sermon thing, going forward, we're going to have to count on ourselves, and we're going to have to count on each other. That means that you're going to have to reach out to some of these folks whose spiritual beliefs might not jive with yours, and understand their scriptures and understand their beliefs and understand their hopes and their fears and understand them as people. Because going forward, it's our neighbors that we're going to have to count on. Going forward, it's our communities that we're going to have to count on, because the overarching society, quote unquote, that we're living under right now on its best day, as you've heard me say before, is a veneer about this fucking thin. And it's cracking. It is cracking. So think about that going forward. Think about reading some scripture. Hell, it couldn't hurt. At the very least, read the book of Revelation. Read that. I don't think it's going to change anyone's mind reading that, but it may be enough to make somebody reflect. That's interesting. I don't know if that's some sort of alert, or if that's what kicks in when my forehead my forehead chip gets out of range of the scanner. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. So anyway, yeah, we are going to have to count on people because civilization is a veneer, and that veneer, that film it's cracking. I'm going to use that as a segue to cover one particular way that we have to look forward to here in the United States where that veneer of civilization is cracking. For those of you who have been paying attention to the Derek Chauvin trial. Actually, before we get into that, I do want to address, because I promised Ryan that I would. I want for all of you to do homework on John Titor, Titor, and the IBM 5100 series. I'm not going to take too deep of a dive into that because, as a matter of personal belief, I don't think that the guy was a time traveler, but it is a fascinating story, and I'm all about a fascinating narrative. I will post a link for anyone who wants to do the homework on that to get into it. I know I'm throwing all this out now because I know I'm about to get into a rant and rave sort of sidebar that is probably going to take me off into Never Never Land, and I'm not going to get back to it. But allegedly, the man was a time traveler, and he came from 30 years in the future, and he put some features into an early laptop computer, put some features in there in particular in an effort to save us from ourselves further down the line. I'm going to leave that to y'all to look up, because if I was going to properly address it, we'd need a full 30 minutes, and I don't have it today. And I did promise Ryan, so I wanted to get it out there for you guys to look at, and then we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on from there. Ways that the veneer of civilization is cracking right here in the United States today. The lead story from newspapers even overseas: Minneapolis on edge over the outcome of the Derek Chauvin trial, says Ilhan Omar. You can't write it this good. Ilhan Omar, Somalian immigrant, anti-American snatch flap of a human being, not a fan. Her presence in the American Congress is probably one of the more dangerous warning signs about not the unintended consequences, but about the deliberate intent of our current immigration policy. They flooded a district in the Obama years. They flooded a district in Minnesota with Somali immigrants. They did this with the specific intent of changing the voter demographics in that particular district. They've done it in other districts all over the country, and we've seen it in districts all over the country, but nowhere was it as effective as this one particular district that got Ilhan Omar elected. I'm spending this much time on Ilhan Omar to remind us of a couple of things. One, we need to watch our asses, because we are leaving our political process open to this sort of manipulation to get this sort of a person where they actually have a voice in the United States Congress. That's terrifying to me. Terrifying to me and a lot of other people. But the flip side of that is that we have to remember that Ilhan Omar, though she is a member of Congress, speaks for a couple of square miles worth of people. She's not a voice for any big mass, in spite of the inordinate amount of media attention that she has received. I would go so far as to say the same thing with regard to Sandy Cortez. Her district is about 6 blocks wide in fucking New York. And you would think from the amount of camera time she gets is that she's one of the most prominent members of Congress that ever walked out of the state of New York, judging by the media time she gives. She represents a few blocks. Ilhan Omar, same way. But the thing I will say for Ilhan, with regard to this Minneapolis situation, is she is a Minnesota rep. And she's right there in the middle of the madness that's going on in Minneapolis. For those of you who have been living under a rock in a cave on a remote planet for the last year plus, Derek Chauvin, Minneapolis police officer, was involved in an incident with a certain George Floyd. 3 other officers were involved. George Floyd died as a result of the events of that day. Notice that I'm parsing my words. In the beginning, and you guys can go back and find all of the sermons where I addressed all of my points of view throughout the entire arc of this crisis. In the beginning, I bought it. I bought that Chauvin was a murderer. I even addressed him as a murderer on one of those programs. Having seen the body cam footage, I no longer believe that the man was a murderer. Before we go any further, there you go, Ryan. You're not a space cadet. You're a heavy thinker. You're a really, really heavy thinker, and it might just be a little too heavy for what we got going on today. So, not making you out to be a space cadet or disrespecting you in any way, man. Come on, you know better than that. But getting back to it, yes, I referred to Derek Chauvin as a murderer. I saw the body cam footage. You need to see the body cam footage, all of it unedited, because once I saw that, my mind changed with regard to Derek Chauvin. I'm not saying that he executed his responsibilities flawlessly with regard to his involvement with that situation. I'm saying that he did do exactly what he was trained to do. I am saying that the reason why he pulled Floyd out of that car after putting him into the car was because Floyd insisted that he do it. And I will say that had Derek Chauvin and his cop buddies not even shown up, had they been busy grabbing a donut or otherwise occupied, that George Floyd would have died of a drug overdose and we'd have never known his name. These are facts. You're free to dispute them, but you'd be wrong. These are all facts. And that's brought us to this point. And now we have the trial. How many of you out there, show of hands, Ryan included, how many of you out there are old enough to remember the Los Angeles riots of 1992? Anybody? Hands up, hands up. That followed the Rodney King incident. You guys know? Yeah. They at least waited for the verdict. Riots didn't break out immediately after the incident. Here, we've already had a whole summer of riots in the wake of the incident before we even get down to the point of the officers being charged. And now the officers have been charged. In the case of Derek Chauvin, they have been overcharged. They have been overcharged with the full knowledge of the Minnesota District Attorney, having seen the body cam footage. That's why I'm urging you to look at it. You have to take into account that the District Attorney in Minneapolis saw this body cam footage and elected to press with murder charges anyway. There is no way that even a first-year law student could look at that footage and even attempt to make a case for murder. And the Minnesota DA knew that, and he charged anyway. Why? Why? Because he could be assured of the verdict, that at least on the murder charge, Chauvin was going to walk, and that at least on him walking on that murder charge, you were going to get a fresh set of riots and destruction. They have done everything to bias the jury. Actually, that's true, Ryan. Ministry did do an amazing video. They have done everything to bias the jury. Immediately before the jury selection process began, the city of Minneapolis paid a settlement of $27 million to the family of George Floyd. $27 million. Immediately before the beginning of the jury selection process. Why? Because they want to make sure that there is a, air quotes, proper outcome. They want to make sure that the jury pool is tainted by the knowledge that the city has, for all intents and purposes, admitted wrongdoing. Even though Gaslight Central, they verbally insist over and over again, no, this isn't, we're not saying we did anything wrong. We're just going to pay a settlement that not only is the largest one in history, but is more than the entire balance in the city's bank account to cover legal settlements. The city was budgeted for a little under $20 million for all legal settlements for that year. And they paid $27 million on a single settlement. But they're not admitting wrongdoing. We haven't admitted that we've done anything wrong, and we want to make sure that the jury selection process is completely unbiased. This shouldn't corrupt that process at all, should it? Again, welcome to Gaslight Central. But that's where we are. $27 million settlement. Here's where it gets even more frightening. The one thing that the court itself has a responsibility to do in such a charged environment. And before we get any further, let me just say a real quick thank you to Dennis, because we sat having coffee for hours yesterday talking about this thing, and was ultimately a factor in my decision to cover it today. You have to keep the anonymity of the jurors. Why? In any high-profile case, you've got to make sure that the jurors have their anonymity, because you cannot have them being pressured by outside sources. Once there is pressure from outside sources, then the objectivity and the unbiased nature of the jury becomes corrupted, and you wind up with a verdict that you might not have ordinarily achieved. So the New York Times, first of all, CNN, we're told that we're not supposed to know anything about these jurors. And what does CNN do? Updated on the 29th of March, the jury has been selected for Derek Chauvin's trial. Here's what we know about them. And proceed to give details, not just on the total makeup. Oh, well, there were, 6 men and 5 women, 4 black people, 3 that identified as biracial, that kind of thing. That sort of detail I could see them giving out. But they give details on occupations. They give details on ages. They give details on political affiliations. They give basically enough detail for anyone who wanted to dox these people or find out who the hell they were to find out. I believe that the word that's been used on the other side, where people take these minute details, where people have actually managed to find the identities of, say, Antifa, the college professor who was an Antifa maggot that came out and smacked the guy in the head with a bike lock. He had a mask on, and they had very few details to work with, but it's what the right calls weaponized autism, where you got a whole lot of computer geeks with nothing better to do than sort this thing out, and they found the fucking guy based on a partial view of one single photograph of the guy's face. They found him, and now CNN giving out these details. And as if that wasn't enough, New York Times comes immediately behind them. Everything we know about the George Floyd jurors, and gets into even more detail about these people's lives. Why would they do something like that? Because, again, we're being ruled by the mob. They'd want to do something like that to ensure, again, air quotes, a proper outcome. Well, how could they come to any other decision? I mean, we all saw the video where Chauvin had his knee on the guy's neck. We all saw it. I mean, how could they come to any other conclusion? Well, maybe this. George Floyd's girlfriend testifying, Miss Courtney Ross, his girlfriend, testifying to the previous opioid addiction. I'm not going to go tearing ass into anyone for an addiction, because those of you who are my friends and those of you who have been my followers for any length of time that didn't know me personally know that I have struggled myself with addiction. That the last time that I put a needle in my arm was April the 12th of 1997. So I understand. And I also understand from the perspective of opioid, from the standpoint of the opioid epidemic, as someone who has been prescribed pain medication consistently to the point where it was insurmountable, to the point where just quitting was not an option. So I'm not going to go tearing into him for that. That particular part of it is fucking tragic. It really sucks that they found themselves in that position. That has precisely fuck all to do with what followed. George Floyd's girlfriend testified this week, not only that they were both addicted to opioids, which we already knew, but that George Floyd's supposed friend, what's this guy's name again? Morris Lester Hall. The guy that you see in the video sitting in the passenger seat next to George Floyd, Morris Lester Hall. How tight was George with Morris Lester Hall? Well, he wasn't that tight. The only time Morris came around was when he was buying dope. So you're saying that Morris was a drug dealer. Well, I'm not saying that, and then proceeds to say it. So the guy sitting in the passenger seat was a drug dealer. And immediately when that testimony came out, Morris Lester Hall, who was the key witness for the prosecution, the guy that thumped his chest and said that he was going to be the voice that would get a conviction in the case, immediately flipped the script, pleads the fifth, and now is not going to testify on behalf of the prosecution. The case is gone. Like it or not, believe your own eyes with regard to the camera footage or not. Derek Chauvin is going to walk. At the very least, he is going to walk on the murder charges. So again, circling back to why is the New York Times putting out details on the jurors? Because they know that the case is weak. And now the case just got even weaker, and they are going to need something. What better way to compel a jury to find the proper verdict in such a case than the thought of their private details being made public? They've got to know if this much detail has gotten out about them while the trial is going on. Once the trial is over, it is going to be open season, and they know that anyone who votes for acquittal is going to have a target on their back. They know that the mob is hungry. They know that the mob is insatiable. And they know that if they find to acquit, that the mob will be coming for them. The city of Minneapolis has already capitulated to the mob. And getting around in a bigger picture, this is exactly why we need to be looking at this from some different angles. That the media perception is dictating one thing, but we've got to take on a much broader view of this thing going forward, because this isn't just about the trial of Derek Chauvin. This is about who is really running the fucking show when it comes to the justice system in the United States. We can have the argument about systemic racism in the courts and systemic racism in law enforcement and everything else. We can have that discussion. We certainly can. I don't think you're going to like it if you have to really look at the statistics that lie beyond the sound bites. But having said all that, the mob are the ones making this call in the Chauvin trial. The city of Minneapolis has already established that before it even comes to trial, they are paying out a record settlement of $27 million. Why are they doing that? How does that make financial sense from a perspective of the city's legal department? It stands to reason that you would wait for the trial to be over with to find out, even if it'd been legally ruled that you did something wrong. Maybe it goes to trial and they find for acquittal and you don't have to pay anywhere close to $27 million to the victim's family or anything at all because we didn't do anything wrong. Well, that's not why they're paying the settlement. They're paying the $27 million settlement in the hopes that it will alleviate this insatiable mob's bloodlust. They are paying it in the hopes that it'll be enough to chill people the fuck out enough not to burn down the city again. This isn't about right and wrong anymore. This is about the mob having figured out what folks like you and I are still in the process of wrapping our heads around, and that is that violence is more effective than the political process at this point in our nation's history. They have figured out that if they put enough pressure and show that they are willing to burn a city to the ground, the fact that they are factually incorrect in every relevant aspect of this trial means precisely dick. Because they're still getting their way. Give us what we want or we'll burn the motherfucker down. And the same pressure is going on these jurors. And no less than the New York Times and CNN are giving out the scraps and the first little details that is going to enable the cancel mob to find out who these people are and exact a vengeance on them if they don't find the correct verdict. I don't care how you feel about George Floyd. I don't care how you feel about Derek Chauvin. I don't care how you feel about law enforcement. I don't care if you are a Blue Lives Matter guy or an all cops are bastards guy. I don't care. Because this is no longer about that. This is about a mob flexing and getting their way. You do what we ask you to do. You do what we want you to do, or we'll burn your fucking city down. Now, being a student, a scholar of violence, I've always said that. Violence is way more effective than the political process. But is that where we are as a nation? Is that where we are as a constitutional republic? Have we gotten to the point where we are no different than sub-Saharan Africa or any of a half dozen third world shitholes I could name in Central and South America where it's ruled by mob? What, we're different simply because we won't acknowledge it for what it is? They are bracing the jurors. They are putting fear into them. You guys better find the right way. You guys better convict, or you've got a target on your back. You want a target on your back? I didn't think so. They're putting pressure on the city. You better pay up. You better do the right thing, or we're going to burn this motherfucker down again. And what does the city do? They capitulate. The only things remaining to be seen right now, literally, the only things remaining to be seen right now are how the people are going to react and how the federal government are going to react. Because the script has flipped a little bit with regard to the feds. Because the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that spent all last summer starting up a legal fund to bail these rioting maggots out of jail now are going to be in charge of reestablishing order in the wake of the now inevitable riots. Personally, I'd be more interested to see how the mob reacts if the jury were to find guilty on all counts. I hope they do find guilty on all counts, not because he's even guilty, not because I want to see him do like that, because I want to see historically the point made that they did exactly what that you did exactly what they told you to do. You paid a $27 million settlement. You found this cop guilty on all charges, and they burned your shit to the ground anyway. Because I think it may take that to make people realize that once you start to base your behavior on appeasing a mob, there's simply no end to it. I think that would make the point crystal clear. I don't think we'll get that. I think Chauvin's going to walk. I think that the federal government, now that Kamala and Biden are in charge and not campaigning, are actually going to have to address the thing. I think they will be hesitant. They won't send in the National Guard. They won't take any steps to settle the riots out. They won't come down with an iron fist to end the shit the way they had to do in Los Angeles ultimately when the LAPD couldn't control it. And you are going to see riots in every major city of the United States. Why? Because unlike in 1992, where there was at least lip service paid to being impartial, the news cycle is driving the narrative that there is systemic racism, that this is further proof of it, that people should riot, that we have to sustain these things, and a lot of people are going to die. And a lot of people are going to lose their homes, and a lot of people are going to lose their businesses. All because one guy overdosed. It's a tragic situation, but here's what I hope. You have heard me say before that we are in a perpetual race between catastrophe and enlightenment, and that it may take catastrophe to reach enlightenment. If it does, so much the better. May it come quickly. With regard to this situation, what I hope for moving forward is that the people themselves, we can't count on the government, we can't count on the police, we can't count on the military, the National Guard to come in and squash this thing. I hope that it comes down to the people. I hope that when this mob steps up like the bloodthirsty, insatiable beast that it is, that there are enough ordinary people, ordinary men and women who realize that they can't count on anyone coming to save them, and they do this time what they should have done much, much earlier when it would have been more effective and less costly. That they raise their fists and they raise their guns to this mob and say, no fucking more. That when these Antifa maggots roll down the street with their Molotov cocktails, that dozens of them at the front of the pack get bled the fuck out before they even have a chance to light that rag. That these BLM rioters go to pull down stores in their own neighborhoods and their own people. Black business owners step out in front of those shops and lay them the fuck open with a load of buckshot. Because this isn't about race anymore. This isn't about race anymore. This isn't about cops anymore. This isn't about law enforcement or systemic racism anymore. What this is about at this point are ordinary people like myself, my friends out there, like you guys, that just want to get up and have peace in their fucking life. That just want to get up and work for a living, that just want to get up and earn a paycheck, that just want to get up and run their fucking business. And this mob that feeds on fear is trying to deny us that. If the one currency that we're trading in now is going to be fear, then the message I have for the mob is stand by. Because when it comes to throwing your weight around and getting your way by fear and fucking violence, you don't have the arms. You don't have the numbers. And I think ultimately we're going to show you that you don't even have the will. Regular, ordinary people, regular, ordinary Americans have had enough. We'd like for you to take us at our word. But if not, the time has come where we're going to be more than happy to show you. I am the Reverend. That is the gospel. Appreciate you guys being here. I'm already a couple minutes over. We'll wind it down real quick. The segues on this one weren't as seamless as I wanted them to be, and I think I'm just going to have to start writing down some talking points to the side, the margins, keep me from going off on these tears. I want to apologize again to Ryan for not getting into the John Titor thing the way that I'm sure he would have liked me to, but I did put it out there. It's worth looking into. Please go and have a look at that stuff. If anything that I said did you any good, or if you'd really just like to take up a GoFundMe just to shut me the fuck up and tell me to get off the air, that also works. I'm on PayPal, I'm on Venmo, I'm on Cash App, I'm on Facebook Pay, I'm on all of the above, man. If anybody wants to say that, post my Cash Apps, Chris. I'll post that. I'll get Mo to post that later. Go hit Mo Baxter's page. on Facebook and send him a reminder, and I'll let Moses handle it. And hopefully one day we'll get Moses on here so you guys can meet him. He's done some great things for me. Anyway, send me the stuff if you want to drop me some coin on Cash App or Venmo or PayPal or any of the other things. But even if you can, or even if you don't want to, or even if you just want to sit back and watch this guy rant and rave every Sunday, I'm all about that too. Just remember the important bits, man. Get out there and spread that gospel a little bit. Tell some people about it. Say, I got a crazy guy that rants and raves every Sunday. Maybe you'll dig it, maybe you won't, but it's worth a look. And as always, the really important, the big three. Be the signal, not the noise. Be the light, not the darkness, and be that strength. Boom! In a world full of weakness. I appreciate you guys being here. Going forward, guys, I think we got another week or so. Before the verdict actually comes down. I'm gonna suggest strongly to you, and we'll spend all Sunday on it next week, and how to get dug in, places to stay away from, things to do, things to not do. But I would suggest keeping your powder dry, people. I would suggest you sticking to people that you can count on and places that you can count on nothing happening. Because I think this round's going to be a little rougher than it was last time. We'll see. As always, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Communicate the ideas. Even if you disagree, hell, especially if you disagree. You find somebody who doesn't share your views, don't try to brace him into feeling the way that you do about it. Because he's certainly not going to do the same to you. But don't be afraid to have the conversations, man. It is the only way that we grow. Exposing ourselves to people with different worldviews, people with different priorities, man. Maybe the only thing that you take from the conversation is, holy shit, this guy's a fucking idiot. I don't listen to a word he says. Hell, maybe even get that from watching one of my sermons, and I'm okay with that. But you'll never know if you don't reach out. You never know if you don't try. So keep that mind open, keep that mouth moving, keep the conversation alive. Love you guys. See you next Sunday. Peace.